They say timing is everything. I should have known mine was off the moment Blake smiled too easily. It was a Friday afternoon, too late in the week for false hope, but there it was, spread across his face like a car salesman closing a deal. I had spent the entire week preparing for this moment. 3 years of data analysis results printed and organized in a neat folder on my lap, customer behavior patterns, revenue optimization models, the sales forecasting system I had built from scratch. The system that had increased our quarterly profits by 40% over the past 18 months. This wasn't just about a promotion anymore, it was about recognition I had earned 10 times over. Blake had been my colleague for 3 years before his promotion to HR director last month. We used to grab coffee together, complain about management, share weekend stories. But sitting across from him now, I felt like I was facing a stranger. The same person who used to ask me to explain his Excel formulas was now deciding my career path. "Thanks for coming in, Harper," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. His office still smelled like fresh paint and ambition. A single family photo sat next to his computer, him and his younger brother Cameron at some beach resort, both grinning like they owned the world. I opened my folder, my hand steadier than my heartbeat. I wanted to discuss my performance review and the senior analyst position that opened up. I've prepared a summary of my contributions to the data team over the past 3 years. His smile faltered for just a second before snapping back into place. "Harper, I appreciate your enthusiasm, I really do. But we've decided to go in a different direction with the team structure." The words hit me like ice water. A different direction? The new leadership wants fresh perspectives. We're bringing in someone who can take the data analysis in a more modern direction. He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, I noticed how much he enjoyed having me on the other side of his desk. I felt my chest tighten. "Blake, you know my work. You've seen the results. The customer retention model alone saved us over $200,000 last quarter." "I'm not questioning your abilities," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "It's just that we need someone who can think bigger picture. More strategic vision." "Who?" The word came out sharper than I intended. Blake's smile widened, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. "My brother Cameron is joining our team next week. Fresh out of business school, full of innovative ideas. He'll be taking over the data analysis projects." The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Cameron Blake. 26 years old. 0 work experience. And now my replacement. "Cameron has never worked a day in data analysis," I said, my voice carefully controlled. "Everyone starts somewhere," Blake replied with a shrug. "Besides, he's got that entrepreneurial mindset we're looking for. Sometimes experience can be a limitation." I stared at him, searching for any trace of the colleague I used to know. The person who once admitted he couldn't even create a pivot table was now lecturing me about limitations. "So what exactly is my role going to be?" "You'll be supporting Cameron, helping him get up to speed. Think of it as mentoring. We value your institutional knowledge." Mentoring. I was being demoted to train my replacement, a fresh graduate whose only qualification was sharing DNA with my new boss. As I walked back to my desk, my phone buzzed with a Slack notification. Cameron Blake had been added to our data analysis channel. His profile picture showed him in a graduation cap, arms raised in victory. The message from HR was already pinned: "Please welcome Cameron Blake to the team. He'll be leading our data initiatives moving forward." I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. 3 years of late nights, weekend analysis sessions, and breakthrough discoveries. All of it about to be filtered through someone else's name. Someone who probably still thought correlation implied causation. But as I stared at my screen, something cold and sharp settled in my chest. Not anger, clarity. Blake thought he was playing chess, but he had no idea I'd been building the board all along. By Monday morning, Cameron Blake had already made his presence known. I arrived at 8 a.m. to find him setting up at the workstation next to mine, the one that used to belong to our intern. He was wearing a navy suit that still had creases from the store packaging and adjusting his tie like he was preparing for a photo shoot. "Harper," he called out cheerfully. "Blake told me you'd be showing me the ropes. I'm really excited to dive into this data stuff." Data stuff. 3 years of advanced statistical analysis reduced to data stuff. "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. "What would you like to start with?" "Well, I was thinking we could look at those customer thing reports you've been working on. Blake says they're pretty important." Customer thing reports. He meant the comprehensive behavioral analysis that had taken me 6 months to develop. The one that identified buying patterns across 4 different demographic segments and increased our targeted marketing effectiveness by 60%. "Sure," I said. "Let me pull up the dashboard." As I opened the system, I noticed something that made my pulse quicken. The main database access was still under my credentials. All the automated reports, the data pipelines, the custom algorithms, everything was tied to my personal login. Blake had been so eager to install his brother that he'd forgotten the technical details. "Wow, this is complicated," Cameron said, squinting at the screen. "Can you make it simpler? Maybe just show me the important numbers?" I spent the next 2 hours explaining basic concepts like correlation coefficients and confidence intervals to someone who was supposed to be my superior. Cameron nodded along, occasionally asking questions that revealed he didn't understand the difference between median and mean. By lunch, I had a plan. I stayed late that night, long after Cameron had left for whatever new employees due to celebrate their first day. The office was quiet except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew. I opened my personal cloud storage and began uploading files. Not the raw data, I wasn't stealing anything. But the documentation I'd written, the methodology guides, the custom scripts I'd developed on my own time. Everything that made the system actually work. Then I checked something that had been nagging at me all day. The advanced analytics license we used for our predictive modeling, the one I'd convinced my previous manager to let me handle personally when the company was going through budget cuts 2 years ago. I pulled up the license dashboard. Owner, Harper Clearwater. Payment method, my personal credit card. Renewal date, next month. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. The entire foundation of our data analysis capability was licensed under my name, paid for with my money, and completely under my control. Blake thought he could erase me and hand my work to his unqualified brother. But he'd made one crucial mistake: he'd never bothered to understand how any of it actually worked. I opened a new document and began typing. If Cameron was going to be the data analysis leader, then he was going to have to prove he could actually analyze data. I started preparing a little test that would expose exactly how much he understood about the systems he was now supposedly in charge of. By the time I left the office that night, I had a clear picture of how this was going to play out. Blake wanted to play favorites with his family? Fine. But he was about to learn that some games have rules he didn't even know existed. Cameron Blake thought he'd landed his dream job. What he'd actually done was walk into a trap 3 years in the making. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. I sat in the back corner of the conference room, watching as Blake introduced Cameron to the senior management team. Cameron stood at the front of the room in another crisp suit, holding a presentation remote like it was a magic wand. "I'm excited to share some of the innovations we've been working on," Cameron announced, clicking to his first slide. The screen displayed my customer segmentation analysis, charts I'd built, insights I'd discovered, conclusions I'd drawn after months of careful work. But Cameron's name was in the corner where mine used to be. "As you can see," Cameron continued, "our customer engagement has improved dramatically. This is due to our new strategic approach to data analysis." I watched the faces around the room. Some nodded politely. Others looked confused. Blake beamed with pride from his seat near the front. "The key insight here," Cameron said, pointing to a graph, "is that our customers fall into distinct categories based on their purchasing behaviors." It was painful to watch. He was reading from my notes, using my words, but missing every nuance that made the analysis meaningful. When someone asked about the statistical significance of the patterns, Cameron stumbled through an answer that revealed he didn't understand what the numbers actually meant. "That's fascinating," said Victoria Sterling, our external auditor who attended quarterly reviews. "Can you walk us through the methodology behind these confidence intervals?" Cameron's face went blank. "Well, the methodology it's pretty standard. Harper can fill you in on the technical details if you're interested." The room turned to look at me. I sat up straighter, feeling a familiar surge of confidence. The analysis uses a combination of k-means clustering and regression analysis to identify statistically significant patterns in customer behavior. The confidence intervals are calculated using bootstrapping methods to ensure reliability across different sample sizes. Victoria nodded approvingly. "And what's the p-value for these correlation coefficients?" "Less than 0.001 for all primary variables," I replied. "The model has been validated against 3 separate datasets." "Excellent work," Victoria said, then turned back to Cameron. "You've built a very sophisticated analysis framework." Cameron nodded enthusiastically, as if he had any idea what we'd just discussed. After the meeting, Blake cornered me by the coffee machine. "Harper, I appreciate you supporting Cameron in there, but remember, he's the team lead now. Try to let him take the spotlight." I stirred my coffee slowly, choosing my words carefully. "Of course. I just want to make sure our analysis maintains its accuracy." "I'm sure Cameron has everything under control," Blake said. But I caught the slight uncertainty in his voice. That afternoon, I sent Cameron an email with what I called a routine data quality check, a series of questions about our current models that any competent analyst should be able to answer. Questions about data sources, algorithm parameters, validation methods. His response came back an hour later: "Can we discuss this in person? I prefer collaborative problem solving." Translation: he had no idea what I was talking about. I was starting to enjoy this. By 8:30 a.m. on Thursday, I was standing near the break room window, watching the parking lot fill with cars. My phone had been eerily quiet all morning, no meeting invites, no urgent requests for data updates. Cameron had stopped asking me questions after I'd sent him that technical assessment. Blake avoided eye contact when we passed in the hallway. The isolation felt different now. Before, it had stung like a slap. Now it felt like preparation. I grabbed my coffee and walked past the data team's workspace. Cameron was hunched over his computer, frantically clicking between spreadsheets. His confident demeanor from the first week had cracked, replaced by the deer-in-headlights look of someone drowning in water they claimed they could swim in. I approached Jenna from legal, someone I'd worked with on compliance reports for the past 2 years. "Have you seen the latest customer satisfaction metrics?" I asked casually. "There's been some unusual fluctuation in the data quality scores." Jenna looked up from her laptop, her expression carefully neutral. "Harper, I know you're concerned, but Cameron's handling that now. Maybe you should talk to him directly?" The dismissal hit me like a cold wave. I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes. I just noticed some inconsistencies that might affect our quarterly compliance reports. "Look," Jenna said, lowering her voice. "I get that this transition is hard. But Blake's made it clear that Cameron is running the data team now. People are trying to respect that." I nodded slowly, feeling the familiar burn of being patronized. "Of course. I understand." But as I walked back to my desk, something else crystallized in my mind. They weren't just ignoring my expertise, they were actively choosing ignorance over accuracy. Blake had created a system where asking the right questions was considered insubordination. By 10:45 a.m., the email I'd been expecting finally arrived. Subject: urgent, client data discrepancy, Meridian Analytics. My stomach dropped as I read the message. Meridian Analytics, our biggest partner firm, had flagged major inconsistencies in the customer behavior reports we'd been sending them. The data patterns didn't match their internal analysis, and they were questioning the reliability of our entire dataset. I knew exactly what had happened. Cameron had been updating the reports using my templates, but he didn't understand the underlying algorithms. He'd been pulling data from different sources, mixing quarterly and monthly figures, and applying seasonal adjustments to the wrong variables. Within an hour, Blake was pacing outside Cameron's cubicle, his voice carrying across the office even though he was trying to whisper. "What do you mean you're not sure how the calculations work? It's your system." "It's not really my system," Cameron protested. "Harper built all this stuff. I've just been updating the numbers." "Then fix it. Meridian is our biggest client." I watched the scene unfold from my desk, feeling a mixture of vindication and genuine concern. This wasn't just about office politics anymore. This was about real money and real relationships that had taken years to build. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn message. "Rachel Torres, CEO of Meridian Analytics. Harper, hope you're well. Quick question, are you still overseeing the data analysis at your company? We've noticed some significant quality issues with recent reports. The methodology seems to have changed completely. Would love to chat if you have a few minutes." I stared at the message for a long time. Someone had noticed. Someone who actually understood data analysis had seen through the facade and reached out directly to me. But I didn't respond. Not yet. By 3:20 p.m., Blake was standing at my desk, his face flushed and his tie loosened. "Harper, I need you to help Cameron sort out this Meridian situation. He's having trouble with some of the technical aspects." I looked up from my computer, meeting his eyes directly. I thought Cameron was supposed to be taking our data analysis in a more modern direction. "Didn't you say experience could be a limitation?" Blake's jaw tightened. "This isn't the time for attitude. We have a crisis here." "I'm not giving you attitude," I replied calmly. "I'm just following the new team structure you implemented. Cameron is the lead, and I'm here to support him. But if he needs me to fix fundamental problems with the analysis, maybe we should discuss what that means for the leadership arrangement." For a moment, Blake looked like he wanted to fire me on the spot. But we both knew he couldn't, not when his brother had just proven he couldn't handle the job Blake had handed him. "Just help him figure out what went wrong with the Meridian reports," Blake said finally. "We'll discuss the bigger picture later." I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting next to Cameron, walking him through the basics of data validation and quality control. It was like teaching calculus to someone who had never learned fractions. Every explanation led to 3 more questions that revealed deeper gaps in his understanding. "Why are there so many different formulas?" Cameron asked, staring at a spreadsheet that calculated customer lifetime value. "Can't we just add up the numbers?" "Because different customers have different behaviors," I explained patiently. "New customers, returning customers, seasonal buyers, they all need different analytical approaches. But that's so complicated. There has to be a simpler way." I realized then that Blake hadn't just put an unqualified person in charge of my work, he'd put someone in charge who fundamentally didn't understand why the work mattered in the first place. That evening, I stayed late and did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened my personal cloud storage and began documenting everything. Not the company's data, I wasn't crossing any legal lines. But my own work, the methodologies I'd developed, the custom algorithms I'd written on my own time, the analytical frameworks that made our reporting system actually function. I also did something else. I checked the license status on the advanced analytics software that powered our entire operation. The license I'd set up 2 years ago when the company was cutting costs and couldn't afford the enterprise package. Owner, Harper Clearwater. Payment method, my personal credit card. Renewal date, next month. I had a choice to make. I could renew the license and continue propping up a system that was being used to erase me. Or I could let it expire and watch the whole operation come to a grinding halt. But there was a third option. One that would give me leverage without destroying the company or hurting innocent clients. I opened a new browser tab and began researching employment lawyers who specialized in workplace discrimination and retaliation cases. If Blake wanted to play games with my career, then maybe it was time to show him what the rules actually looked like. By 7 a.m. Friday morning, I was back in the office before anyone else arrived. The building was quiet except for the hum of servers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew finishing their rounds. I had 2 items on my agenda. First, I was going to fix the Meridian analytics problem, not for Blake or Cameron, but for the company and for the client relationship I'd spent years building. Second, I was going to set up what I privately called my insurance policy. I opened the Meridian reports and began identifying the errors Cameron had introduced. It was worse than I'd initially thought. He hadn't just mixed up data sources, he'd fundamentally misunderstood what the numbers represented. Customer acquisition costs were calculated as total revenue divided by new customers, ignoring the complexity of multi-touch attribution. Retention rates were based on single purchase recency instead of behavioral patterns. It would take me most of the day to fix, but I could do it. The question was whether I should. Instead, I opened a new document and began typing. A detailed technical assessment of the current data analysis system, documenting every error, every misalignment, and every red flag that Cameron's leadership had introduced. I included screenshots, code samples, and a timeline showing exactly when each problem had emerged. Then I did something that would have been unthinkable a month ago. I scheduled a meeting request with Victoria Sterling, the external auditor who had been so impressed with my work during the quarterly review. Subject: Data integrity concerns, request for confidential discussion. As I hit send, my hands were steady, but my heart was racing. I wasn't just documenting problems anymore, I was building a case. When Cameron arrived at 8:30 a.m., he looked like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his tie was crooked. He slumped into his chair and immediately opened his laptop, staring at the screen like it might provide answers he didn't have. "Morning, Cameron," I said pleasantly. "How are you feeling about the Meridian situation?" He looked up at me with something approaching desperation. "Harper, I've been thinking about this all night. I don't think I understand the system as well as I thought I did. Could you maybe show me how to fix the reports?" For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like sympathy for him. Cameron wasn't malicious, he was just in way over his head, put in an impossible position by his brother's nepotism and ego. "I can help you understand the problems," I said carefully. "But fixing them is going to require some significant changes to how the analysis is being done." "Whatever it takes," Cameron said. "I can't lose this job. Blake will kill me." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a rival or an enemy, but a victim of the same system that had pushed me aside. Blake had used both of us, setting his brother up for failure just as surely as he'd sabotaged my career. "Cameron," I said quietly, "has Blake ever explained to you why I was removed from the lead analyst position?" Cameron's face went red. He said you were resistant to change. That you were stuck in old ways of thinking. "And what do you think now that you've worked with the system for a few weeks?" Cameron was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I think Blake lied to both of us." That afternoon, Victoria Sterling's reply came back, available Monday 10 a.m. Conference Room C. "Please bring any documentation you feel is relevant." I stared at the email, knowing that Monday would change everything. In 3 days, I would either regain control of my professional life or burn down the bridge I'd spent 3 years building. But as I watched Cameron struggling with basic data concepts that should have been second nature to anyone in his position, I realized the bridge was already burning. Blake had lit the match the moment he decided family loyalty mattered more than competence. It was time to stop trying to put out fires and start planning my escape route. By 10 a.m. Monday morning, I was sitting in Conference Room C, waiting for Victoria Sterling to arrive. My laptop was open, displaying the comprehensive report I'd spent the weekend preparing. 3 years of documentation, error logs, and evidence of systematic data quality deterioration since Cameron had taken over. Victoria walked in precisely at 10, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the same sharp expression I'd seen during quarterly reviews. She was followed by someone I didn't recognize, a younger woman with a legal pad and the unmistakable aura of corporate legal counsel. "Harper," Victoria said, settling into the chair across from me. "Thank you for reaching out. This is Amanda Chin from our legal department. I hope you don't mind her joining us." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "Of course not. I appreciate you both taking the time." Victoria opened her portfolio and pulled out a tablet. "Your email mentioned data integrity concerns. Can you walk us through what you've observed?" I turned my laptop screen toward them and began with the basics. Over the past month, our client satisfaction scores have dropped from 94% to 78%. Customer retention predictions are missing their marks by an average of 15%. And we've had 3 major clients flag discrepancies in their reports, including Meridian Analytics, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. Yes. They've been our partner for 4 years. Their CEO reached out to me directly because the data quality had deteriorated so dramatically. Amanda looked up from her notes. "And you believe these problems are connected to recent personnel changes?" I pulled up a timeline showing the correlation between Cameron's promotion and the decline in data accuracy. The problems began appearing within days of the leadership transition. The person now heading data analysis lacks the technical background to maintain the systems properly. "Can you be more specific about his qualifications?" Victoria asked. I felt a moment of hesitation. This was where I had to be careful, criticizing Cameron's competence without making it personal. The current team lead has a business degree but no background in statistics, data science, or analytics. He's been in the role for 5 weeks and still doesn't understand basic concepts like statistical significance or data validation. Amanda scribbled notes furiously. And what was the rationale for this personnel change? According to Blake, our HR director, the company wanted fresh perspectives and modern thinking. But the person who replaced me is Blake's younger brother, a recent graduate with no work experience. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. That's quite a coincidence. I opened another file on my laptop. There's more. The advanced analytics license that powers our entire data infrastructure is registered under my name and paid for with my personal credit card. It's been that way for 2 years, since the company was cutting budgets. Without that license, the entire operation would shut down. And the company wasn't aware of this arrangement? Amanda asked. Blake knew about it when he was just a sales manager. But I don't think he understood the implications when he restructured the team. Victoria leaned back in her chair, processing what I'd told her. Harper, this is clearly a complicated situation. What outcome are you hoping for from this meeting? I had practiced this answer over the weekend. I want my expertise to be properly valued and my contributions to be recognized. If that means returning to my previous role, then that's what I'd prefer. But if the company is committed to the current structure, then I need assurance that quality standards will be maintained and that my professional reputation won't be damaged by association with substandard work. And if those assurances can't be provided? Amanda asked. Then I'll need to consider other options, including whether this situation constitutes retaliation or discrimination. The word discrimination hung in the air like a challenge. I hadn't explicitly mentioned gender bias, but we all knew that replacing a qualified woman with an unqualified man from the boss's family raised obvious questions. Victoria checked her tablet. I'm going to need to discuss this with senior management. Can you provide me with copies of your documentation? Already prepared, I said, handing her a USB drive. Everything is organized by date and category. As the meeting ended, Amanda handed me her business card. Harper, I want you to know that we take these concerns seriously. Someone will be in touch with you by Wednesday. Walking back to my desk, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was actually listening. Cameron was at his desk when I returned, staring at his computer screen with the glazed expression of someone trying to solve calculus with finger counting. He looked up when I sat down. Harper, I've been thinking about what you said on Friday. About Blake lying to both of us. His voice was quiet, almost defeated. I don't think I'm cut out for this job. I studied his face, seeing genuine distress rather than the cocky confidence he displayed during his first week. Cameron, can I ask you something? Did you actually want this position, or did Blake push you into it? Cameron's shoulders sagged. He said it would be perfect for me. Good money, stable career, chance to work with my big brother. But I never wanted to be a data analyst. I don't even like spreadsheets. What did you want to do? Marketing, maybe. Or event planning. Something creative. But Blake said those fields were too unstable. Cameron looked around the office, taking in the rows of computers and analytical reports. This isn't me, Harper. And I think everyone knows it. I felt an unexpected wave of sympathy. Cameron wasn't my enemy, he was another victim of Blake's poor judgment and family manipulation. Cameron, what if I told you there might be a way to fix this situation? For both of us? He looked up hopefully. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time to have an honest conversation with Blake about what's actually best for the company. And for you. The call came at 2:15 p.m. Victoria Sterling's assistant, requesting my presence in the executive conference room at 3 p.m. Please bring any additional documentation you feel might be relevant. I spent the next 45 minutes organizing my thoughts and preparing for what I suspected would be a crucial conversation. This wasn't just about my job anymore, it was about the principle of competence over connections. When I walked into the conference room, I found Victoria, Amanda, Blake, and someone I didn't recognize, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Robert Hayes, the company's external legal counsel. Blake avoided eye contact, his usual confidence replaced by obvious discomfort. Victoria gestured to an empty chair across from them. Harper, thank you for joining us. We've reviewed the documentation you provided, and we've conducted our own assessment of the current data analysis operations. Robert Hayes opened a folder. We've identified several areas of concern that need to be addressed immediately. The first is the question of technical competence in critical business functions. Blake's face reddened. If this is about Cameron. Mr. Blake, Hayes interrupted smoothly, I suggest you listen rather than defend at this point. Victoria took over. Our audit shows that data quality has declined significantly since the recent personnel changes. Client satisfaction has dropped, prediction accuracy has deteriorated, and we've received formal complaints from 3 major partners. Furthermore, Amanda added, the current team structure appears to have been implemented without proper consideration of technical requirements or succession planning. Blake tried again. Cameron is still learning. He just needs more time. Mr. Blake, Hayes said firmly, your brother has been in this position for 5 weeks. In that time, the company has lost 1 major client and nearly lost 2 others. We can't afford to treat critical business functions as training opportunities. The room fell silent. Victoria looked directly at Blake. We're implementing immediate changes to address these concerns. Effective tomorrow, Harper will be reinstated as Senior Data Analyst with full authority over the data analysis team. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with disbelief. And Cameron? Mr. Cameron Blake will be transitioning to a role in our marketing department, where his background and interests are better aligned with job requirements, Hayes explained. He'll report to someone other than his brother to avoid further conflicts of interest. Blake's face had gone from red to ashen. This is completely unnecessary. Harper is obviously trying to undermine Cameron because she's jealous. Mr. Blake, Victoria's voice carried a warning. I strongly advise you to stop talking. Amanda opened her own folder. We're also implementing new policies regarding nepotism and personnel decisions. All future hiring and promotion decisions involving family members will require approval from the executive committee. As for the immediate situation, Hayes continued, Harper, we understand that the analytics license is registered under your personal name. We'd like to discuss transferring that to the company, with appropriate compensation for your prior payments. I nodded slowly. I'd be open to that discussion. Victoria stood up. Blake, you'll be meeting with HR tomorrow morning to discuss your role going forward. I suggest you use the time between now and then to consider how this situation developed and what changes need to be made to prevent similar problems in the future. As the meeting ended, Blake finally looked at me directly. His expression was a mixture of anger and something that might have been respect. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? No, I replied honestly. I just documented what happened and asked for help when I saw problems that were hurting the company. The rest was your doing. Walking back to my desk, I passed Cameron's workstation. He was packing his belongings into a cardboard box, but he didn't look upset. If anything, he seemed relieved. Harper, he called out as I passed. I wanted to say thank you. For what? For not throwing me under the bus. Victoria told me about the marketing position. It's actually something I might be good at. I smiled. Everyone deserves to work in a job that fits their skills, Cameron. I'm glad it worked out. That evening, I stayed late to begin the process of undoing the damage that had accumulated over the past month. It would take weeks to fully restore the systems and rebuild client confidence, but for the first time since Blake's promotion, I felt like I was working towards something rather than just watching things fall apart. My phone buzzed with a message from Rachel Torres at Meridian Analytics. Heard through the grapevine that you're back in charge of data analysis. Looking forward to working with you again. Let's schedule a call this week to discuss some exciting new projects. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's just being excellent at what you do and waiting for the right people to notice. The quarterly review meeting felt different this time. I stood at the front of the conference room, presenting results that actually meant something. Client satisfaction back up to 96%, prediction accuracy improved beyond our previous benchmarks, and 2 new major contracts secured based on the strength of our analytical capabilities. Blake sat in the back row, taking notes. His role had been restructured significantly after the review committee's investigation. He was still with the company, but his authority was much more limited, and he reported directly to Victoria Sterling rather than operating independently. Cameron had found his footing in the marketing department. His creative instincts and communication skills were much better suited to campaign development than data analysis. He'd even collaborated with my team on a customer segmentation project that had been quite successful. The key insight from this quarter, I explained to the room, is that technical expertise and business strategy work best when they're properly aligned. We've been able to deliver better results by ensuring that the right people are in the right roles. Victoria nodded approvingly. Harper, these improvements are impressive. What's your outlook for the next quarter? Strong, I replied. We've rebuilt our client relationships, our systems are more robust than ever, and we have the right team structure in place to support continued growth. After the meeting, I walked back to my desk, which now had a new nameplate reading Harper Clearwater, Senior Data Analyst, in letters that were just a little bit larger than the standard size. My computer pinged with a new email. The subject line read, External Consulting Opportunity, Fortune 500 Client. Rachel Torres had recommended me to another company looking for data analysis expertise. The consulting fee they were offering was more than my annual salary. I stared at the email for a long moment, then closed it without replying. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the opportunity to escape. But now, sitting in my restored position with my authority recognized and my expertise valued, I realized something important. I didn't want to escape anymore. I wanted to keep building. The phone on my desk rang. Cameron's extension. Harper? I have an idea for that customer loyalty campaign we discussed. Do you have a few minutes to look at some data with me? I smiled. Of course. Let's see what you've got. Some victories aren't about defeating your enemies. Sometimes they're about turning your enemies into allies and building something better than what was broken. Blake had tried to erase me, but in the end, he'd only made me stronger. And more importantly, he'd taught me the difference between leadership and mere authority. Real leadership, I'd learned, doesn't come from the name on your business card or whose brother you happen to be. It comes from competence, integrity, and the ability to build systems that work, regardless of who gets the credit. I opened my laptop and got back to work. There was data to analyze, insights to discover, and a team to lead. And this time, nobody was going to take that away from me.